Hi everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing the RISQUÉ Valentine Overbust from Dark Garden. This is just like the Valentine Overbust I reviewed previously, except this is the mesh version. So here is the front, the side, the back, and the other side. The reason that this is called the RISQUÉ Overbust is due to these transparent side mesh panels here. So that is the reason why I'm wearing a dress underneath this corset. So for the length and the fit of this corset, the center front is 15 inches high. The bust over the swell of the breast here down to the lap area along the princess seam is about 16 3/4 inches, almost 17 inches. And the side seam is about 14 inches, and then way in the back is 13.5 inches. So this corset is a little bit taller than some of the other overbust corsets I reviewed in the past, and in particular it's higher from the waist up, which is what I personally need, having a long waist and also a low waist for the corset to cover me properly. In terms of the circumferential measurements, right now I'm wearing a size 24 overbust. The bust, it measured internally, is 34 inches, and at the low hip here it's measured at 36 inches. So this corset gives a bust spring of about 10 inches and a hip spring of about 12 inches. And in terms of the silhouette, I would consider this a mild to moderate hourglass. This does pull me in by a few inches, but it's not going to give an extremely dramatic hourglass silhouette. If you wanted something more dramatic than this, then I would suggest contacting Dark Garden and seeing if they're able to make this in higher reductions in the mesh. Some aspects about this silhouette that I really like. Firstly, the rib cage here. It's not very conical, but it does pull in my lower ribs a tiny bit here, and it does well to smooth everything over underneath the corset. Also, I enjoy the fact that the bust area is rounded. It actually goes and curves over the breast instead of just flattening it and pushing everything upward. Same with the hip area here. Very rounded, very comfortable over my iliac crest. I don't feel any pinching or numbness in this area. Dark Garden offers a number of different ways that you can wear a corset like this if you're not really sure how to wear a mesh overbust. So for instance, if you really wanted to be risque, you could absolutely wear this corset without anything underneath if you wanted to. It would look really cool if you had, say, some tattoos along your rib cage. You can show them off underneath this corset because of the mesh panels. Also, you can wear this corset as shapewear underneath your clothing, even underneath your wedding gown is what they advertise, and it's quite breezy actually because of the mesh panels here on the side. It does offer a little bit of ventilation. Here is the RISQUÉ Valentine Overbust laid flat. For the materials of this, the satin areas, this is a vintage pink silk satin, and there are 2 layers on the front and the back panels here. It wraps around so that it can sandwich the busk and the bones, and this is available in several different colorways, including red and black, I believe. And the mesh panels are just 1 layer, and you can see, I don't even need to open up the corset because you can see how transparent they are. And this is an ivory nylon mesh, I believe, but you can also get this in black if you prefer. Here's what the Dark Garden label looks like, and on the back you can see the size, handmade in San Francisco, and the laundering instructions. And turning this corset on its side, it has a 5-panel pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the bust is mostly distributed between panels 1 and 2 here, and the swell of the hip is distributed mostly between panels 3 and 4, although a little bit on the back of number 2 right there as well. And the assembly of this corset is very easy to see because of these transparent mesh panels here. So because these are just single layers, there's nothing to flatline, and these panels were simply assembled together at the seams with what looks like a very tidy top stitch here. And the seam allowances were actually on the outside of the corset, and so those raw seam allowances were covered with these double boning channels in the vintage pink silk satin here. And these boning channels have 2 different purposes. 1, like I said before, to cover the seam allowances and make it look very neat and tidy. And 2, it also strengthens the seam because this boning channel actually straddles the seam. This seam is right on panel 2, and this seam is on panel 3, and this seam in the middle is just joining the 2 together. So this actually helps to reinforce the integrity of that seam right there. And the waist tape is very easy to see in this corset here. So the internal waist tape here, the white twill tape, is 3/4 of an inch wide, and it extends from between panels 1 and 2 here all the way back to these back grommets here, and it's anchored down at each seam right there. But covering that is this Petersham ribbon that's a little bit wider. It's about 1 inch wide, and it's finished in the vintage pink just to match the rest of the corset here, and I guess to cover that glaring white of the internal waist tape here. And here's a close-up of the binding made from bias strips of matching vintage pink silk satin here. It's neatly machine stitched on the outside with a little bit of a top stitch there and on the inside here. And additionally on the inside you can see that it has a total of 8 garter tabs here, 4 on each side. And here are the matching garters or suspenders that come with this corset. So they're in a matching vintage pink satin, as you see here. They're quite elastic, and they have metal parts to them on the top and the bottom here. These are included in the base price, so you do get these with every RISQUÉ OVERBUST corset. Here you can see the Modesty panel for the back, and it's separate and stiffened, so it's not attached to one side of the corset, so you can choose to use it or not use it if you like. So this particular Modesty panel is about 13.5 inches long by about 5 inches wide, and it's finished on both sides in a matching vintage pink silk satin here. It has 4 bones in it, so there's 2 going crisscross here, 1/4 inch wide steel bones, 2 more 1/4 inch wide steels going vertically here. So when you're lacing up, that is what resists it from crumpling up on you. Also, you can see that there's binding on the top and bottom of this Modesty panel, so that is not boning, but it does provide a little bit more stiffness to prevent the Modesty panel from collapsing. And this corset does not have a Modesty placket per se in the front. However, the knob side of the busk is recessed a little bit. There's a bit of a top stitch here, just about 1/16 of an inch, and that seems to be enough that when you put the busk together, you don't see any gap in between the front busk there. The busk in this corset is 14 inches long and 1/2 inch wide on each side. It's a standard flexible busk. It has 7 loops and pins, all equidistantly spaced, and it's fairly flexible in the front here. Additionally, there is another 1/2 inch wide flat steel bone on either side of the busk. These bones actually start a little bit lower down. They start around there, and they're stitched in, they're anchored in, and then they go to the bottom like the rest of the busk here. And I believe they did that because if a person had close together breasts or very full breasts, then the bone wouldn't extend right up to the top and sort of cut into the inner part of the breast. So they would be able to actually fill out this part of the fabric without feeling any discomfort. There are a total of 22 bones in this corset, 11 on each side. So double boned on the seams here are 1/4 inch wide steel bones. You can see they all attract the magnets here. And there are spirals that actually curve around the bust area here. And in the back here, there are also 1/4 inch wide flat steel bones sandwiching the grommets, as well as a flat bone by the busk here, 1/2 inch wide, just to reinforce it a bit. Here's a close-up of the grommets. There are a total of 34 of them, 17 on each side. They are size 00 with a medium flange around them and finished in silver. I recognize these as being the same brand that is very popular amongst many corset makers in the US. So they're all equidistantly spaced and they're all holding in very well. And on the underside here, you can see nice big washers, and they're set in very securely. There are a couple of splits in each of these, but because they don't catch on the laces, I have no problem with them. They don't affect the functionality of this corset. I don't see any fraying, I don't see any damage around the grommets, so no complaints here. And the laces that come with this corset are 3/8 of an inch wide double-faced satin ribbon, and this holds the bow very well and has a nice low profile if you wanted to wear this underneath clothing. It doesn't add too much bulk. The RISQUÉ Valentine Overbust, like I'm wearing today, is actually not shown on the Dark Garden website. What is shown on the website is their Sweetheart RISQUÉ Overbust, which is 4 panels per side instead of 5. So the Sweetheart version is available for $505, which also includes the Modesty panel and the garters. However, if you're interested in the version that I'm wearing today, the RISQUÉ Valentine Overbust with 5 panels per side instead of 4, and it's also cut for curvier figures, this can be ordered from Dark Garden for $555. And this concludes my review of the RISQUÉ Valentine Overbust by Dark Garden. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you did, please remember to click that like button and help support the channel. If you have any comments or questions about this corset or Dark Garden in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to get back to you or forward your questions over to Dark Garden. And I'll see you guys in a few days for another video. Bye!